Imagine you are staying at a peaceful inn, surrounded by breathtaking nature and the soothing sound of hot spring water trickling nearby. The cold autumn air brushes against your skin, yet the hot spring offers a warmth that calms your soul. But behind this tranquility, something is wrong. Very wrong. On your first night at the inn, you hear a sound. Faint, soft, almost like a whisper. The sound of a woman crying from the next room. You try to ignore it, thinking it's just your imagination, but as the night goes on, the sound grows clearer. Who is that woman? Why is she crying? And why does the inn staff merely give you thin smiles and avoid the subject when you ask about it? You begin to sense that this place harbors a secret far darker than you ever imagined. This is a story of terror that unfolds at the hot springs, where one room in this inn hides a horrifying secret. A secret that, once revealed, might make you regret ever coming here. When my friend Dara and I arrived at the small mountain inn, a sense of peace immediately enveloped us. The fresh air, the beautiful natural scenery, and of course, the famous hot springs made this place seem like the perfect escape from busy city life. We decided to spend a few days here to relax. The inn was small, with only 10 rooms, and each room had direct access to a private hot spring bath. I was assigned room number 5, while Dara got room number 6, right next to mine. Thin walls separated us, and the sound of water from our baths was clearly audible in each other's rooms. After dinner, we returned to our respective rooms. I felt exhausted but also excited to soak in the warm water before bed. As I bathed, everything felt so peaceful. The only sounds were the soft wind wrestling through the trees and the gentle ripples of the water around me. However, when I returned to my room to sleep, I heard something. At first, it was so faint it was barely noticeable. But as time passed, the sound grew clearer. It was the sound of crying, a woman crying. I thought it was Dara, so I decided to check. Dara, I called out, knocking on the door of room 6. No answer. I tried again, but still no reply. Finally, I decided to enter. When I opened the door, the room was empty. The next morning, I asked Dara if she had heard anything the previous night, but she just laughed and said she had slept very soundly. Maybe it was just your imagination, she said with a smile. However, the following night, the sound returned. This time, louder. The crying sounded as if it came from right next to me, from the wall between our rooms. It was impossible not to hear it. I decided to call the reception desk and ask if there was another guest in room number 7, the room next to Dara's. The inn staff, an old man with a serious expression, gave me a strange look before answering. "There's no guest in room number 7, he said coldly. "That room hasn't been used in a long time." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Then, what was the crying I heard?" I asked. The man just gave me a thin smile, as if he was used to such questions. "This place is old. Sometimes strange sounds echo through the building. Don't worry, it's just the house settling." But that night, the crying grew even louder. And it wasn't just crying this time, there were footsteps too, creaking along the hallway. couldn't sleep at all that night. Every time I tried to close my eyes, the sound grew closer, as if the crying woman was standing right outside my door. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that maybe the sounds were coming from outside, from nature. But no, the sounds were coming from inside. When I stepped out of my room the next morning, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. On the floor of the corridor, right in front of room number 7, there were wet footprints. The footprints of a woman, clearly visible from their small size. Those footprints hadn't been there yesterday, and there was no one else around. I knocked on Dara's door, and when she came out, I showed her the footprints. Dara looked confused, but also anxious. "We need to ask the staff again," Dara said. We went back to the lobby and asked the same old man about the footprints. This time, his expression changed. He looked more tense. It must have been another guest," he said briefly, but I knew he was lying. Dara and I decided to investigate further about room number 7. Why wasn't it being used? And what was the connection between that room and the strange sounds we'd been hearing? We asked a few other guests staying at the inn, but most of them avoided the topic. The only one who spoke to us was an elderly woman who had been staying there for several weeks. She told us that years ago, a young woman had stayed in room number 7. She had come with her fiancé, but one night, they had a terrible argument. The next morning, the woman was found dead in the bathroom, with the hot water still running. Some say she committed suicide, but others believe something darker happened, the elderly woman whispered. After hearing the story from the old woman, Dara and I felt increasingly uneasy about staying in this inn. We started considering going home early, but our curiosity kept us there. We wanted to know what was really happening in room number 7. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the wall separating my room from room number 7. I tried to fall asleep early, hoping to get through the night without any strange incidents, but that hope vanished as soon as I closed my eyes. Around midnight, the crying sound returned. This time, it was clearer than on previous nights. It sounded like the woman was crying right beside my bed, begging, lamenting. I felt an unnatural coldness seeping into my room, even though the windows and doors were tightly shut. My body felt frozen, not from the temperature but from the sudden fear that gripped my mind. I tried to call Dara, but no sound came out. Only silence filled the room, with the sobs growing closer. Then, I heard footsteps, not outside the room, but inside. With eyes wide open from fear, I saw a faint shadow move in the corner of the room. A woman with long hair, wearing a wet white gown, stood with her back to me. Her hair covered her face, and her body trembled slightly as if she was cold. I couldn't move. My breath caught in my throat, and cold sweat began to pour down my forehead. The figure stood there, motionless but so real. The soft sobbing came from her. I knew this woman was the spirit from room number 7. Shortly after, there was a knock on my door. A soft yet haunting knock, as if someone was deliberately trying to get my attention. With trembling hands, I stepped towards the door, hoping hoping it was Dara coming to calm me. But when I opened the door, there was no one there, only the dark night and a cold wind rushing into the room. I quickly shut the door, but as I turned around, the woman's figure was gone. The crying had ceased, leaving only the sound of my pounding heartbeat echoing in my ears. I tried to make sense of what had just happened, but my mind felt foggy. The deep fear made it almost impossible to think clearly. I decided to go to Dara's room. I didn't want to be alone in mine for the rest of the night. When I knocked on Dara's door, she opened it, looking confused. "What's wrong? You're so pale," she asked, her voice filled with concern. I told her what had just happened, and her expression turned serious. "I heard something too last night," she said. "But I was too scared to go out. Maybe we should talk to the inn staff about this." The next morning, Dara and I went back to the old man at the reception. This time, we wouldn't accept short answers or deflections. "What really happened in room number 7? Who is that woman?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The old man paused for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I know you've heard about the woman in that room," he said softly. "She was Eliza, a young woman who died here years ago. Not many people know the details, but she came here with her fiancé. They had a fight, and the next morning, her body was found floating in the hot springs." My face paled hearing that story. "Why is she haunting this place?" I asked. The old man shook his head. "No one knows for sure. Maybe there's something unfinished. Spirits like Eliza, they're trapped here, between our world and the other, until something they want is fulfilled." Dara and I exchanged glances. We knew we had been pulled into a mystery far deeper than we had anticipated. We couldn't leave the inn without understanding what had really happened. The terror we experienced during the previous nights lingered in our minds. Finally, Dara had an idea. "Maybe we should try talking to her spirit," she said seriously. I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "We are not paranormal experts." "No, but maybe she just wants to be heard," Dara said. "If we can find out what she wants, maybe she'll stop haunting this place." That night, we decided to do something bold. We lit some candles in Dara's room, sat facing each other on the floor, and tried to summon Eliza's spirit. The soft trickle of water from the pool outside sounded gentle in our ears, but the night felt darker and colder than usual. We sat in silence, waiting. Nothing happened at first, only darkness enveloped us. But then, a sudden cold wind blew, making the candles flicker. The familiar crying returned, this time closer and clearer. It was her. Suddenly, the candles went out, plunging the room into complete darkness. The sobbing turned into louder wails, like someone overcome with grief. I felt someone else's presence in the room with us, and this time, it wasn't faint. "Eliza, is that you?" Dara asked, her voice shaking. There was no answer, but in the corner of the room, we saw a faint shadow. Eliza stood there, her long wet hair covering her face. Her figure was clearer now. She didn't speak, but sorrow and anguish radiated from her entire being. "Do you want us to do something for you?" I asked, trying to stay calm even though my whole body trembled. Eliza's figure slowly raised her hand and pointed towards the window. We looked outside and saw the hot spring shimmering under the moonlight. The water was still, but it felt like something was hidden within it. Dara and I decided to go to the hot spring where Eliza had been found dead. The atmosphere around the pool felt more ominous than usual, as if an energy was holding its breath in the air. We peered into the water, and for the first time, we felt a strong urge to dive in. With an indescribable fear, I dove to the bottom of the pool. There, I found a golden locket, glimmering beneath the water. As I lifted the locket, Eliza appeared at the edge of the pool, tears streaming down her cheeks. It was hers, the locket she had lost the night she died. The locket was the key to freeing her. As I brought it to the surface, Eliza's figure began to fade, and for the first time, her sobbing stopped. She gave a faint smile before disappearing into the night's darkness. Have you ever experienced something similar? Stories like this may be closer to us than we realize. Don't ignore the small sounds or signs around us. If you've ever felt the presence of something unseen, there may be a story behind it. Dare to find out before it's too late.